Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give it a couple of minutes to fill the room here. Good afternoon again, everyone. We're just going to give it another minute or so here to fill the room. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. We'll give it about 30 more seconds here to fill the room. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again for our weekly webinar, Wednesday webinar series. Today's webinar is on artificial intelligence and life sciences, state of affairs in 2021. My name is Brett Spitali, and I'm the Vice President of Advancement here at the National Hemophilia Foundation. At any point during the webinar, if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We have NHF staff members monitoring these questions, which we will pose to our presenter after the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to the community beginning on Friday, February 26. I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Vicar Sayeedi. Vicar is a computer scientist and engineer, a lecturer, and a consultant. Vicar is also an author of several books. His most recent book is about artificial intelligence, and it is entitled The Genome Affair. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, Vicar, and I'll now turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you so much, Brett, and welcome everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today. As Brett mentioned, our topic is AI in the life sciences. Next slide, please. So the program for the afternoon is, I'll spend about 10 minutes just talking about artificial intelligence and defining it a little bit better for everyone, so we're on the same page. There's quite a lot of nuance and texture to the term artificial intelligence, which I think often doesn't get captured well. So this should help set us all on the same page. I'll then talk about some of the more prominent use cases of AI in the life sciences. That'll take up about 25 minutes. And then very quickly, in about 5 minutes, I'll go over challenges and outlook for the future. That subject actually is a very expansive subject. I could probably speak for a couple of hours just on that one segment, but it's a topic for another lecture. And I wanted to give enough time at the end, at least 15 to 20 minutes, so that your questions will have a chance to be addressed. So with that, Brett, the next slide, please. In the coming years and decades, artificial intelligence can be expected to impact virtually every aspect of our lives, from the economy to the job market and workplace, to government and international relations, to world affairs and military conflict. It seems no area of human endeavor will be spared. So given this reality, perhaps it's best we have at least a working understanding of AI and how it might shape our future. The term artificial intelligence means different things to different people. To most, AI is simply the ability to simulate human intelligence in a machine. Implicitly, this refers to the quantitative dimension of human intelligence, the ability some people possess that enables them to think and manage complex ideas and problems that may have a substantial computational dimension. But scholars of human intelligence believe that quantitative intelligence is just one form or dimension of human intelligence. There are a number of other discrete dimensions. This raises important questions. Most of the specialized AI agents we've developed today are highly quantitative or pattern matching in their ability. But humans have perhaps 8 or even more different dimensions of intelligence. So what happens if we develop AI agents that simulate only this one dimension of human intelligence, the quantitative dimension? Historically, society has considered people to be intelligent if they innately possess skills or demonstrate an ability to acquire intelligences or skills that can be readily monetized. As society evolves, the intelligences and talents they value evolve as well. People who do not possess the intelligences or skills that are easily monetized in the age in which they live are viewed in a dim light and are often considered as inferior members of society. This stratification of society can leave these people in a very disadvantaged position. But these people often possess other intelligences and skills that, while not easily monetized, do provide great value for society. These intelligences often enable them to build handmade furniture or musical instruments, to write literature, musical compositions, or poetry, to paint frescoes, portraits, or landscapes, to chisel stone or wood, to form beautiful sculpture, to develop and perform various levels and methods of pedagogy, to coach young people, and so many other activities that enrich human culture and life. Furthermore, some amongst us are strongly left-brained, others strongly right-brained, while some humans are blessed with strong aspects of both. Some amongst us are highly rational and have little room for impulse or emotion, while others have a high degree of emotional intelligence. In some circumstances, the highly rational person is the one we need to lead an organization or society. But in other circumstances, leadership underpinned by emotional intelligence will result in the more desirable outcome. Thus, human intelligence is highly complex and nuanced. So when we speak of artificial intelligence, we now realize we need to be very clear what we are really talking about. When we reference AI, are we speaking purely of the quantitative and pattern recognition dimension of human intelligence that AI companies are working to replicate? Or are we speaking more broadly about the richly complex and nuanced tapestry of human intelligence? What does it mean to be working towards artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence if we are focused only on the quantitative dimension, given that even specialized and narrow AI agents available today are wreaking havoc on society through their presence in e-commerce, finance, lethal autonomous weapons systems, and social media? We must also wonder whether the general AI or super AI agents of the future might develop a form of consciousness specific to their own reality, and whether this variant of machine sentience will conflict with human sentience. What might this mean with regards to their ability to coexist alongside humankind, given that they will be exponentially more intelligent than Homo sapiens? This is increasingly worrisome, since most AI thought leaders believe we will achieve artificial general intelligence within a few decades, and because there are no principles of biology or chemistry, nor any laws of mathematics or physics that preclude the development of consciousness in AI. Conversely, AI can attain superintelligence while remaining asentient, and therefore agnostic to human ethics and morality. This raises the specter of many challenging problems in their own right. In summary, we need to spend more energy and effort within the artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and related interdisciplinary community, researching and addressing the issues of sentience alongside our work in the understanding and development of synthetic intelligence. As a science, artificial intelligence endeavors to understand the organic human mind and its ability for intelligence, with an end goal of simulating this intelligence in silicon and machine. We are making tremendous progress in this area, particularly in the last 15 years or so. We have amassed an impressive ability to aggregate enormous volumes of digital data, along with our capacity to design and build faster computer processors that can process this data. We have also dramatically enhanced our understanding of neuroscience as it relates to deep learning neural networks. And we have translated this understanding into very high performance and effective machine learning strategies. But at the same time, it's important to point out that our collective understanding of consciousness or sentience remains opaque at best. The evolution of sentience, how, why, and the purpose of human consciousness persists as one of the greatest unanswered questions in neuroscience. We believe consciousness has arisen through biological evolution and has been enhanced further through cultural evolution. But that understanding of our consciousness, that understanding of ourselves and of our physical and social environment, and our understanding of the future remains mysterious. This ability to dream, to imagine, and strategize seems largely unique to our species, particularly our foresight. The theory of mind states that humans attempt to see things from another's perspective. But we must first recognize that we have a mind before we can project this ability to think onto someone else. With certainty, only humans over the age of 3 have this ability to see things from another person's perspective. Predicting what someone else is going to do and why they're going to do it seems unique to Homo sapiens. There have been more than 20,000 papers written on consciousness from diverse perspectives, including neuroscience, philosophy, psychology, and theology. However, despite so much study and reflection on this issue, we are still unable to offer a suitable and universally acceptable definition of consciousness, or an understanding of how the brain works in this regard. Although we cannot provide an understanding of consciousness or sentience, there is universal acceptance that consciousness resides in the brain. An empirically sound theory of consciousness, unfortunately, does not yet exist, but neuroscientists believe we are getting closer. This understanding will be crucial if we are to safely coexist with artificial intelligence, and then later with artificial superintelligence. I'll now present a few prominent use cases for artificial intelligence in the life sciences. Next slide, please. These are the 8 areas of the use cases that we'll cover today. And the first one will be in cardiovascular medicine. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the first symptom of cardiovascular disease may be a heart attack, stroke, or even sudden death. But years or decades before myocardial infarction or other severe event, atherosclerosis has been forming in the arteries. We also know our bodies are constantly rendering microsignals and indicating our physiological status. These microsignals include heart rate, heart variability, electrical signals, and changes in respiration. If we could capture and process these numerous subtle patterns and signals of underlying undiagnosed illness, we could have a dramatic impact on health outcomes related to cardiovascular disease. This is an obvious role for artificial intelligence. Today, AI agents can be trained to recognize patterns by analyzing enormous amounts of data, a volume of information that's simply incomprehensible by humans. The AI agent can learn from this data and alert us when underlying problems are present, far in advance of any dangerous cardiovascular event. ECG reports acquired from ubiquitous wearable devices, such as smartwatches or smartphones, can know within 15 seconds whether a concerning degree of pathology is present. Since AI is capable of rapidly identifying patterns in the diagnostic images of tens or hundreds of thousands of healthy and diseased patients, our ability to improve our treatment of cardiovascular disease is greatly enhanced by AI. To realize this vision, we will need large, carefully curated data sets, along with clinicians and machine learning specialists with advanced training that can work together in multidisciplinary teams. The Mayo Clinic is in possession of very large volumes of data, and they're embedding AI engineers side by side with leading clinicians. AI specialists are now completing rounds alongside their clinical colleagues while also attending and observing medical procedures. This interdisciplinary approach is enabling deeper understanding and sparking promising insights in the minds of the AI specialists, and this is leading to exciting innovation. In this manner, AI is extending the capability of physicians. AI is serving the role of a torch in the darkness that illuminates the path so physicians will be able to see and do more in advance of the onset of serious cardiovascular disease. Next slide, please. The next use case is COVID-19. A new AI agent developed at the University of Copenhagen and trained on a dataset of just 4,000 Danish citizens who previously contracted the coronavirus can now determine with 90% accuracy whether a person will die if they become infected with the virus. The agent can also predict with 80% accuracy which patients will need respiratory support if they become infected. It's an extraordinary achievement that will help physicians more effectively triage patients. Doctors will quickly know which patients are most likely to need the machines, and they will hopefully save more lives as a result. Danish public health experts are now using this AI agent to understand and predict which members of the population should receive the vaccine first, and to make more informed decisions on an optimal vaccination strategy as new waves of infections surge across the globe. Public health experts hope that combining infection rate patterns with the population's broader health data will enable them to predict which hospitals should receive respirators to avoid shortages in the event of another outbreak. Earlier in 2020, Mads Nielsen from the University of Copenhagen's Department of Computer Science began working on this AI agent to help hospitals during the first wave of the coronavirus because they were afraid they did not have enough respirators for their intensive care patients. Nielsen's AI agent relied on factors known to be risks for serious COVID-19 infection, factors such as weight and age, while also identifying less obvious risk factors. Nielsen's work has also found that the likelihood of death or of needing a respirator is heightened if a patient is a male, has high blood pressure, or an underlying neurological condition. The AI agent's findings about the order of importance of factors affecting mortality rate were BMI, age, hypertension, sex, the presence of neurological disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, diabetes, and heart disease. Nielsen has cautioned that the University of Copenhagen's AI agent will not be able to replace a physician's assessments, but rather that it will be of substantial help in augmenting their capabilities. Next slide, please. Our next use case is in vitro fertilization. On July 25th of 1978, Louise Joy Brown was born in London in the United Kingdom. Louise was the first birth resulting from a pioneering procedure known as in vitro fertilization, or IVF. By 2020, 8 million babies around the world were born following conception using the IVF procedure. Infertility is a trying and deeply emotional problem that affects the lives of nearly 1 in 7 couples, as their longing for a child often remains unfulfilled. Over the past 40 years, in vitro fertilization has helped millions of these couples achieve their dream of starting a family. But despite the emotional strain, life upheaval, and painfully high cost of IVF procedures, there is still no guarantee of success. In fact, in 2018, the average birth rate for an IVF embryo in the United Kingdom was just 23%, whilst in the United States, it was about 27%. As a result of the low IVF success rate, many couples will submit to these fertility treatments multiple times, with each failed episode compounding their emotional pain and financial burden. Even when successful, IVF procedures are both emotionally and physically exhausting. Following weeks of hormone injections, a woman's eggs are extracted and then combined with sperm in a culture dish. During the next 5-day period, the eggs will develop into embryos, and one of these embryos will be implanted inside the woman's uterus. A major element contributing to the success in IVF procedures is for the embryologist to select the embryo that is most likely to lead to a healthy pregnancy. Fertility specialists must perform this task manually by peering into a microscope and making an educated guess based upon past experience and feel. But today, artificial intelligence is pointing to a better path forward, a path with a higher rate of success. The company Life Whisperer has developed an artificial intelligence agent that has been trained on tens of thousands of microscopy images from previous IVF cycles and can assess these microscopic images and quantitatively rate the selection of embryos for the embryologist. Fertility specialists now have a much better sense of which amongst the available embryos is most likely to lead to a pregnancy. This AI agent can assess an embryo's viability using its morphological features, an ability that a human eye gazing into a microscope is simply incapable of differentiating. In a study that examined over 1,600 embryos, Life Whisperer's AI agent was found to be 25% better than an embryologist acting alone. Today, artificial intelligence agents are increasingly being used to help select embryos for implantation during IVF in clinics around the developed world. They are being trained to more precisely detect the highest quality in vitro fertilization embryos and are increasingly outperforming trained embryologists. Researchers at Brigham and Women's Hospital and at Mass General Hospital are developing another artificial intelligence agent that can improve IVF success by helping embryologists in their selection of embryos that are most likely to result in a healthy birth. The deep learning neural network in this AI agent is trained on thousands of images of embryos, and it's now able to differentiate and identify embryos with the highest potential for success, significantly better than 15 experienced embryologists from 5 different fertility centers across the United States. Scientists believe that this AI agent and similar agents under development will benefit both clinical embryologists and patients. The Brigham and Women's AI agent was trained using images of embryos captured at 113 hours following insemination. Among 742 embryos, the AI agent was 90% accurate in choosing the highest quality embryos. In Israel, Researchers are now training AI agents on tens of thousands of images to optimize their skill in egg selection. These emerging AI prediction models can help patients determine their statistical probabilities of pregnancy and even of subsequent pregnancies. A machine learning technique known as geometric deep learning can process many different types of information formats to train the AI agent to the point where it is 20% better than human experts at selecting a viable embryo and 30% better than human experts at determining or at detecting embryos that are likely to result in a failed pregnancy. An AI agent underlying a fertility app is being developed as well. This AI agent offers 24/7 support for couples who have been trying to conceive a child by using 500,000 data points that can help prospective patients screen themselves online anonymously using their age, weight, lifestyle considerations, and other relevant factors. Couples can manipulate these factors to see how their probability of conception changes as they dispose of bad habits or reduce weight, and it can reduce hospital visits for prospective IVF patients to just 2. Next slide, please. Neuralink. Neuralink is an exciting technology from Elon Musk. It was initially being targeted at overcoming trauma in the brain and spine that has resulted in paralysis. Neuralink is now a seamlessly implanted device. Using robotics, a surgeon will replace a section of skull in the shape and size of a coin. The robotic surgery necessary for the ultra-high precision procedure is initially being developed and refined by implanting in the skulls of pigs. The Neuralink device is 23 millimeters in diameter, about the size of a large coin, and is about 8 millimeters thick. The human skull is 10 millimeters thick. The device has very fine wires or threads that are connected to the brain. The Neuralink device is wireless and has a 1 megabit data rate. It has all-day battery life and 1,000 channels. It uses inductive charging, much like a smartwatch, and once implanted, the device is virtually invisible. As previously mentioned, a high-precision robot performs the implant procedure, and it takes about 1 hour without general anesthesia. Since fine electrodes are being inserted into the brain, there is significant risk of bleeding. But the robot takes an image of the implant region and then uses superfine precision while connecting the wires. It is able to make these connections without touching any blood vessels. Elon Musk recently demonstrated the technology on pigs. He first introduced Joyce, a normal pig in the control group who has never had an implant. We were able to observe her behavior before meeting the other pigs, so we could confirm what normal behavior looked like in this species. We then met Gertrude. Gertrude had a Neuralink implant, but behaved no differently from Joyce. Finally, we met Dorothy. Dorothy initially had a Neuralink implant, but later had it removed. She's still perfectly normal. This was a critical proof of concept regarding reversibility and safety. With Gertrude's implant, Neuralink can now collect data from the probes in her brain. Neuralink can then predict the movement of her limbs and can thus overcome the limitations in movement caused by paraplegia or tetraplegia. Musk said they now have several pigs with 2 implants. 1 implant is necessary to collect the data on which limbs the brain wants to move, and 1 Neuralink device would trigger and regulate those same limb movements. In July of 2020, Neuralink secured FDA approval to begin clinical trials. They are planning to study the device in patients with spinal cord injuries by using neural shunts to stimulate limb movement. Musk said Neuralink's goal is to get the price per implant down to about $2,000 for the device and the precision implant procedure. As we learn more about Neuralink's technology and the enabling of a safe and effective interface between the brain and the machine, we will begin to move in the direction of an internet interface. This is the true goal of Neuralink. Then we can see high-speed queries from our Neuralink-enabled brains out to the internet and rapidly return data. We will then fulfill the goal of a human-machine hybrid, a cybernetic organism or cyborg, an AI-enabled human. Next slide, please. Ophthalmology. Moorfields Eye Hospital in London is the oldest such hospital in the world. They see over 600,000 patients annually, more than twice the number of similar American or European specialty eye clinics. According to specialists at Moorfields, 285 million people worldwide have some form of visual impairment, and in 80% of these cases, if the patient's condition is diagnosed in a timely fashion, the visual impairment is reversible. Retinal diseases are diagnosed using an imaging technology known as optical coherence tomography, or OCT, which gives very high resolution images of the back of a patient's eyes in a non-invasive manner. The technology has revolutionized ophthalmology. Moorfields now performs many thousands of these OCT scans every week. But analysis of these scans and subsequent diagnosis in a timely manner is a problem for Moorfields and for eye specialists everywhere. This unfortunately delays patients in getting the diagnosis and treatment they may need and can have undesirable or severe consequences, since early diagnosis and therapy means doctors can save sight. Moorfields has been working with Google's DeepMind Health Division in London to see how artificial intelligence might help with this problem. DeepMind is the world's leading artificial intelligence company, along with OpenAI in San Francisco and Facebook AI Research, or FAIR. These are the top 3 AI companies. DeepMind's AI agent can now detect a wide array of eye diseases that can compromise a patient's sight. It can do so with the same degree of accuracy as expert ophthalmologists, and it's helping these specialists to prioritize patients with the most serious conditions. DeepMind's AI agent can make sense of these enormous data sets of OCT images, a task that is beyond the intellectual scope and processing speed of humans. Today, retinopathy is the most common disease in working age adults, but it's also 90% preventable. Vision impairment is expected to triple by 2050, and there simply isn't a sufficient supply of global AI specialists, optometrists, or ophthalmologists to manage this developing situation. The good news is that AI enables immediate detection and grading of the degree of retinal disease. Age-related macular degeneration is a serious problem in aging populations. In the UK, 200 people develop blinding forms of AMD every day. Patients need to be seen within 2 weeks of the onset of their symptoms. But with the sheer volume of referrals at Moorfields and at similar facilities around the world, it is very difficult to meet this target. But now DeepMind can analyze the OCT images and identify AMD, diabetic retinopathy, and other serious eye conditions. The AI agent then refers the patient to a particular specialist based upon the nature of their condition, prescribes the therapy, and also provides the basis upon which it has formulated its recommendation. With the sophistication of the DeepMind AI agent, patients can now visit their local optometrist for OCT scans, and then the AI agent will triage patients and refer those with serious conditions to specialists within the UK's National Health Service system and Moorfields. Next slide, please. In an announcement that stunned the scientific community in November of 2020, the UK artificial intelligence company DeepMind announced in the prestigious scientific journal Nature that they had solved one of the most complex and challenging problems in biology, the problem of protein folding. Finding a solution to this 50-year-old dilemma was considered the holy grail in the field of biology. Since 1994, there has been a biannual competition called the Critical Assessment of Protein Structure Prediction, or CASP. In 2018, DeepMind's AI agent, AlphaFold, won this competition by a comfortable margin. But in 2020, the second generation of their AlphaFold AI agent produced results that were well beyond anyone's expectations. DeepMind dramatically outperformed 100 other teams in the CASP competition. It was a stunning outcome, given that many biologists and scientists in the field had begun to give up, resigned in their belief that there was no solution to the protein folding dilemma. DeepMind's second generation AlphaFold 2 artificial intelligence agent promises to revolutionize this long vexing problem and hence accelerate drug discovery and development. Further, once biologists and scientists understand these protein structures, this new knowledge can change the way we understand the natural world. Let's briefly go over the biological basis of the discovery. Amino acids form three-dimensional structures known as protein folding. And although we've identified over 200 million proteins, and although we have the ability to produce synthetic proteins, the ability to accurately determine the shapes of these proteins has remained elusive. Without an understanding of their shapes, drug discovery and development have remained exceedingly challenging. It can typically take the examination of 10 to 12,000 molecules before one is identified as a suitable therapy that can proceed to clinical trials, and the overall drug development process can take upwards of 10 years. The current cost of this process can easily surpass $1 or even $2 billion. Human proteins can often fold hundreds of amino acids in an exponentially large number of combinations, something in the range of 10 to the power 300. The resulting shape of the proteins will determine whether it catalyzes a chemical reaction, becomes an organism's scaffolding, or transports molecules into and out from the cell. Additionally, misshaped proteins can cause many deadly diseases while also playing a role in aging. The ability to accurately predict these protein structures from their amino acid sequence is an unprecedented advancement in the life sciences and in medicine. It has the potential to drastically accelerate efforts to understand the building blocks of cells and enable quicker and more advanced drug discovery. Proteins are the key building blocks of life and are intimately involved in every biological process. They are also responsible for most of what happens inside cells, and the behavior of a protein is determined by its three-dimensional shape. Proteins tend to adopt their shape without help, guided only by the laws of physics. Drugs developed by the pharmaceutical industry work by attaching a protein in a particular place, thereby altering or disabling its function. For example, the 3D structure of the coronavirus, spike protein, enables it to bind to receptors in our noses. In the future, knowing a protein's shape may enable scientists to identify optimal binding sites and make it easier to synthesize therapeutics. Nevertheless, a great deal of complexity remains, and there is still much to learn, since many interactions in the human body remain beyond our understanding. Still, DeepMind's artificial intelligence agent AlphaFold's impact on biology represents a significant paradigm shift. As 2020 drew to a close, we were expecting to see the publication of over 20,000 scientific papers discussing the role of AI in this branch of science. In 2021 and the years to follow, we can expect this rate in publications to expand by 40 to 50% in each subsequent year. Andre Lupas, an evolutionary biologist at the Max Planck Institute for Developmental Biology in Tübingen, Germany, believes AlphaFold's achievement is revolutionary and transformative. DeepMind's agent has also helped Lupas find the structure of a protein that has eluded his Max Planck team for a decade. DeepMind's 2018 performance at CASP startled many scientists in the field, since CASP has long been the purview of small academic groups. Janet Thornton, a structural biologist at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, European Bioinformatics Institute in Hingston, UK, and a past CASP assessor, had begun to believe that the protein folding dilemma might not be solved in her lifetime. She now hopes that DeepMind's approach will help shine a light on the function of the thousands of unsolved proteins in the human genome, and even make sense of disease-causing gene variants that differ between people. Next slide, please. Just a quick time check. I have 2 use cases remaining. Would your advice be to continue or to work towards finishing up?
I think we have some questions that came in. Vicar, if you want to work towards finishing, that would be great.
Okay. I had one more use case regarding radiology and one more use case regarding connectomics, which are extraordinarily fascinating. But let me jump to the end here, and we'll go to the challenges and outlook for the future slide, which I think is down 1 or 2. This is the one here, yeah. So AI specialists with the requisite skills are in scarce supply and are very expensive. Annual salaries for highly skilled AI scientists filling non-executive staff positions are currently in excess of $1 million per year, and there's a great deal of volatility as academic and industrial leaders in AI actively recruit talent from the limited new supply and from each other. We expect there will continue to be a shortage of experts in all related disciplines. The implications of artificial intelligence on our lives as individuals, workers, and as members of society will be profound and revolutionary. The impact to our business environment will be equally revolutionary as AI capabilities rapidly encroach upon the domain of higher and higher value-added skills in the workplace. AI's behavior will resemble floodwaters in a low-lying region of the world, now exposed to rising sea levels as a result of climate change. The only remaining option is to move to higher ground. But in the case of AI, its own march to higher ground will be relentless. In a 2020 report, labor economists in Germany projected that during the course of this decade, 800 million jobs will be affected by AI, with many being completely eliminated. These changes are unmistakable, and society will need to respond, as in the case of climate change, sooner rather than later. The socioeconomic changes, and therefore political implications, resulting from such dramatic impacts to people's working lives is not something we can afford to ignore. It will be increasingly destabilizing to society. From the perspective of geostrategic implications and international affairs, the development of AI will have equally profound ramifications. With the power of AI when paired with other technologies, including facial recognition and biotechnology, AI can be used as a very repressive tool in the hands of authoritarian regimes. With the ability to profile individuals and to know everything about them, human liberty, privacy, and other freedoms we hold dear are at risk of being lost forever. In closing, these problems are all being further exacerbated as the world bifurcates into 2 distinct economic, sociopolitical, scientific, and technological ecosystems in the wake of the emerging Cold War between China and America. Let me stop here, and we can address any questions you may have for my lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Vicar. We do have several questions that came in, and I will start with this one. How can AI be used to address some of our basic human needs like food insecurity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an extraordinary question. I mean, an extraordinarily important question. Um, and I know that there is work going on in organizations like the United Nations and the World Food Program, and the ability of AI, particularly using satellite images to assess tracts of land, of farmland, to use data analytics to predict which parcels of land or which regions of land are more likely to incur drought conditions in this year or the next year, and therefore adapt the farming approach in terms of which crops are being planted there. This is one example of how it is being used. So the potential is very, very exciting, very, very hopeful that AI can be used in that, you know, to address basic human needs like that. Yeah, I definitely see it happening.
Great, great, thank you. Next question comes in. Does AI have any roles in gene therapy or gene editing?
It definitely will. You know, the fundamental attribute of AI that differentiates it from humans or even from normal computing, its ability to function like the human mind, in that we can, you know, when you program a computer with a traditional algorithm, the algorithm is bounded with the certain conditions that that can occur. And if you have conditions that occur beyond that, you default to some else condition. But in the case of AI and deep learning neural networks, it can explore outcomes that you could not have conceived. So this is the one attribute, and its ability to process. So when we look at, you know, the human genome or the genome of any other species, they're so large and there's so much data there. So the ability to understand, to be able to get to the heart of, you know, which gene affects which attributes and which portfolio of genes might affect a single attribute. This is a complexity that is really very much suited for the capability of artificial intelligence. I don't know that we have anything there. I wanted to talk about Jennifer Doudna at the University of California, Berkeley, and Emmanuel Charpentier, who won the Nobel Prize this fall for the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing, and some of the feelings and sort of the nightmares they have when they wake up and think about what they've created. But when you pair it with AI, the potential for both good and you know, less noble intent is certainly there.
Great, great. Thank you, Vicar. Next question comes in. As you mentioned earlier, my Apple Watch does capture some of my health data. How do we as consumers or patients use this data to live healthier, better lives?
I think probably in 2021, 2022, you'll see a lot happening in that regard, particularly in some of the other developed economies where you have national health services, because, you know, they cover the entire population, and they also are concerned about managing costs as you have aging populations. And, you know, of course, we know very conclusively in health systems that the earlier you are able to diagnose the onset of disease, and we spoke about that a little bit in today's lecture as well. You know, the earlier you can identify certain disease states, you can deal with them much earlier. So I definitely think that this is, I'm sure it's being worked on, particularly in developed economies that have national health services, but also in the private sector in countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, who are sort of at the cutting edge in terms of Western society, at least with regard to artificial intelligence applications.
Great, thank you. Another question comes in, Vicar. This is a good one from our patients. What are some practical ways that patients can use the currently available AI technology to enhance our clinical visits with our providers?
Yeah, I think it's a similar question to the last one, in the sense that anything that we can do to use technology, to use AI to optimize the relationship between the patient and the clinic and the physician. For example, in the UK, they have this huge influx of patients that are showing up at optometrists with various sight issues with vision impairment. And what the optometrists are doing, because of their limited skill relative to the ophthalmologist, they're basically putting everybody into the queue for the NHS. So you have this huge backlog of patients, but they've now deployed an AI in that regard, and the AI is triaging the patients, and the AI is able to determine which of the patients has a pressing need. In other words, the pathology in the various patients, which is serious and which is less serious, and then triaging the patients and ranking them, and then assigning them within the health system to the physicians or the ophthalmologists with the particular expertise to deal with that. So lots going on. It seems to me, the most of the examples, the really fascinating examples I'm seeing are coming out of the UK. I think it has to do with, the enormous burden that's being put on the NHS and the aging population, and their desire to try to manage the expense and the cost and contain the costs using technology and AI. And it's a very advanced society in terms of AI as well. So I'm seeing a lot coming out from there.
Great, Vicar. Next question that comes in, not sure if you would know about this, but is IBM's Watson succeeding in its application of AI to medical diagnosis?
Watson is certainly a very, very good. IBM in general is, superb. The top three at this point seem to be, Google is just really, really way out in front. They own DeepMind, they own Google Brain, they own Calico. Calico is doing a lot of work in the life sciences, kind of secretive. They have, of course, awesome resources, financial resources to recruit the best talent in the world. I was speaking a little bit about how costly AI talent is. Definitely after them, OpenAI in San Francisco, which has $1 billion seed investment from Microsoft and from other very big investors, Facebook AI, Amazon, Microsoft in their own right, and then IBM. If you look in terms of publications, probably in the leading technical journals, Google is probably far out in front. OpenAI is doing a great job. Facebook AI is doing a great job. So IBM's there. IBM's probably in the top 5, and I'm not sure you would put them in a leadership role, but yeah, definitely amongst the top. Yeah.
Another question that came in, Vicar. What ethical concerns do you personally have in regard to AI?
Oh gosh, I could. I'll give a very brief answer, but it's a topic that I spend quite a lot of time on when I speak in my podcasts and I write my essays. If you do have any interest, if your audience has any interest, I have over 40 or so podcasts on YouTube, and many of them deal with the ethical issues dealing with. AI has a tremendous potential for good, and we've talked about so much of that today, and so many of your insightful questions regarding AI were regarding the hopeful aspects, but it has some very, very dangerous aspects. It's the question of the hammer can be used to pound nails and build homes and shelters for people, but can also use to inflict tremendous trauma. The hammer doesn't know any different, and AI is much like that in the way that this extraordinarily powerful technology has extraordinary power to do harm as well. And we're seeing that in the erosion of rights in authoritarian societies. And the technology is being sold around the world, and it's being used in surveillance. The technology today is so sophisticated that it can recognize a face and use the AI, the facial recognition software can recognize a face and then process the face and know and identify the person in 1/10 of 1 second. This is happening in China now, where you have perhaps 400 million cameras deployed, with the plan to have 600 million cameras deployed by the end of 2021. So the surveillance of the society, and then that surveillance, the way that it's used is really unsettling. Let's say you said something on social media that maybe was not uh, not not seen as positive by the state. Then you see something called your social media score goes down. Maybe you do a couple of other things that are seen as unpleasant by the state. Your social credit score, it's called, it declines. Then suddenly you go out and you try and get onto the metro, and you find that you're not allowed access to the metro. Or you go up, into the store, and that the gallon of milk that you would typically buy now costs you 30% more. The power of the state to use this kind of technology to control and take away the freedoms of individuals is something that's really, really distressing, and something I research a lot. I think a lot. I write quite a lot about it. I podcast quite a lot about it. So it is as much good, let's say, as you can do with this technology. You have the potential for doing as much harm. Authoritarian societies were very, very difficult to support in the last century, but the technologies that are available today make authoritarianism and concentrated power with no separations of power and no fourth estate, no free press. It makes these kinds of these environments very, very plausible. So that's definitely an ethical, moral concern that I have. Yeah. Sorry, that's a bit long-winded answer.
No, it's very, very well spoken. I think we have time for one more question, Vicar. I'm going to shoot this one over to you. It's kind of along those same lines, and you might have touched on this a little bit, but what safeguards are in place or need to be in place to ensure that AI is used for the purposes of good?
It's a wonderful question. Some of the people, DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, who is the sort of absolute genius mind, founder behind the DeepMind company, he sold his company to Google, but in the governance that goes with the sale are very, very strict ethical rules regarding how his technology can be used. This is also, we are seeing Sam Altman, who is the founder or one of the founders of OpenAI, which is just another extraordinary AI company in San Francisco, are very active in organizations that are working on ethical AI. There's a film on Netflix called Social Dilemma. Some of you may have seen it, just a wonderful film. And if you watch this, you can get some sense of some of the efforts that are going into trying to protect the society from the abuses. Today we're living in a world of what we can essentially call narrow AI or specialized AI. And but even with such narrow focus, these AI agents are wreaking incredible havoc. I mean, we have already the ability for lethal autonomous weapon systems, for example. So there are those safeguards, there are those guardrails in place. We are seeing a lot of states around the world, sovereign states, putting up a lot of obstacles using arguments like, the technology doesn't exist yet. How can you expect us to develop governance and safeguards regarding it? They don't want it, basically. It's a way of pushing it off. But there are those who are actively working on that, and credit to them. But it's probably an issue similar to what we experienced in the last 50 to 70 years regarding nuclear technology and weapons of mass destruction, similar kinds of trends where there are those good forces and also those sort of shady forces who are more reluctant to put in governance and bylaws to regulate.
Great. Well, it looks like we're coming up against the hour here, so I'd like to thank you, Vicar, for taking the time to join us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
We certainly appreciate your time and your expertise. And I'd also like to thank every one of you for joining us as well, too. Please note that this recorded webinar will be available on Friday, February 26th at hemophilia.org under the events tab with all of our other archived webinars. Also available in the events tab is our upcoming schedule for our weekly Wednesday webinar series. So thank you again, Vicar, for joining us. We truly appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending.